Why in 2025 would someone want to read a book discussing Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln Douglas debates that happened in 1858? And how does that become real now? One thing that I tried to do, and perhaps sometimes to a fault, in my undergraduate classes, is I try to attach these historic events to today's politics for people to see the relevance. Now, unfortunately, if you're dealing with a group too novice in history, they're going to blur the lines and get caught up in today's politics as opposed to the consistency of propaganda that exists in politics. And with Abraham Lincoln being the most popular American figure, at least in writing anyway, there are more books written on Abraham Lincoln than any other character in American history. The only person that's been written more about in history than Abraham Lincoln is Jesus. So Abraham Lincoln is an extremely popular figure. Why? Because the story of America is written into the Abraham Lincoln story. Abraham Lincoln presided over the Civil War, and the Civil War became this story of American redemption, thereby white redemption. And the imagery of Lincoln as the leader of that time became a mythical story of whites redeeming what they see as being the country's greatest sin, which I feel should definitely be challenged by the genocide of Native Americans. Also, perhaps the taking of Mexican land, starting with the state of Texas and the Mexican-American War. But that being said, these images of egalitarianism, equalitarianism, abolition have been projected onto Lincoln as through time racism became a scarlet letter in the white community. And when I mean through time, I mean 1960s, not during the Civil War or after the Civil War, because you have to remember, after the Civil War for 100 years, we had convict leasing, we had Jim Crow, we had Plessy versus Ferguson, nationally endorsed segregation. We had Brown versus Board of Education. We had civil rights resistance. We had the war on drugs under Nixon. We had the war on drugs under Reagan. We had convict leasing thereafter. So there has always been a racialized control of labor and an exclusion of access to wealth between white and black races in this country. But from 1865 to 1965, it was overt and it was dominant in a way that it has not been since 1865. It's more post 1965. It is more organizational racism. It's more systematic racism. It's more of the critical race theory. It's more of the systems that were articulated in Lyndon B. Johnson's Kerner report. But again, to the original question, why would the Lincoln Douglas debates in 2025 be a valuable resource today? Why would somebody want to read a book about that? Well, Many whites today, especially when we're talking about conservative politics with the MAGA movement, those are the extreme, those are the people that are embodying the classic superior race values that our country has been built on, which is why they want to make America great again. They want it like it was before. And they have created a term called black fatigue. They're tired of hearing about blacks' complaints. They're tired of hearing what blacks want. They're tired of black, 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 black. Whites don't get anything. What if we did white, 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 white? Where's white, 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 white? And that is because many people, many Americans in particular, are undereducated in the American jurisprudence, the Constitution, our Naturalization Acts, our presidential speeches, our senatorial speeches that are foundational to the formation of this country, where you hear white, 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 white. You hear Lincoln in these debates say that the western part of the country, the reason why he did not want slavery in the western part of the country was because that was where white men, poor white men, should be able to go to get homes and develop and do all of that. If rich white plantation owners got it, these surplus population, people without means of plantation care, won't develop and form this middle class. See, around 1860, the rich were paying 90% of the taxes because it was rich and it was poor. So they were trying to make this middle class, which is why they started this homestead. And that middle class was going to start paying the bulk of the taxes. Now, again, this is all about white people. This has nothing to do with black people. So when they're talking about slavery, the institution of slavery in their minds is independent of the slave. Two completely different things. This institution is stopping white labor because if I have an economy building for poor whites so they can start paying taxes and the tax rate for the rich can go down, what are we still hearing in politics today? Cutting taxes for the very rich. That's always what this country has been about. So, if we're trying to reduce these taxes and put this tax burden on these poor people with wage labor, how is a economic system that has free labor going to flourish? We have to raise the value of labor by decreasing the amount of free labor or limiting the amount of free labor. Notice, get a book called The Lincoln-Douglas Debates, or Lincoln by David Herbert Donald, Pulitzer Prize winner. And you pretty much want to read between 1854 and 1858. And that's where they're talking about this particular debate. Now, at this time, during this debate of Lincoln and Douglas, they're not debating. Now, they're debating, Lincoln and Douglas are debating for a senatorial seat to represent state of Illinois in Congress, right? You have Native American land being taken, which is where the homesteads are coming from, other than the Mexican land that's already been taken, right? That's number one. You have tariffs that need to be looked at. You have the panic of the year before, 1857, economic panic. You have what other things did they have? You have new states coming into the Union. What else? They Lincoln's friends took clear lead. Very much. Debates didn't include. The speakers could have discussed other serious issues of importance to the country just emerging from the Panic of 1857. Regulation of banks, that's huge. The revision of tariffs, control of immigration. Tell me that is not. Do you see? It's the same story, different century. Same story. It's the same stuff we talking about. What is Trump talking about? Tariffs. What's he talking about? Controlling immigration. Provision of homesteads for farmers. Now that farmland and them homesteads are taking Mexican land and Native American land. Improvement of factory workers, labor and circumstances. All of these things they could have been talking about. They were talking about slavery, which had really nothing to do with Congress. They're talking about the Mexican-American War, that's over. They're talking about as to whether black people were intended to be included in the United States Constitution or the Declaration of Independence when it said all men are created equal. I don't know why Lincoln would say it did mean to include black people. Generally, when Lincoln said something that was unaligned with his general frame of thought, there was a political angle. And hopefully, as I get deeper into research, I will come better to understand why he said that. It's two things I don't understand what Lincoln did or why he did it. Shortly before he was assassinated, he said, perhaps we need to consider giving voting rights to particular black people. That is very much inconsistent with his policies, expressions, speeches, and the other is him saying that all men created equal under the Declaration of Independence, that's what the forefathers meant. That doesn't make sense because most of the forefathers, oh, my phone is here. Most of the forefathers owned slaves. So it's not likely that it's not even logical to deduce that that's what it meant. Now, it would be a better argument for him to say that's what it should have been. But to say that that's what it does mean, I have to do some more Lincoln research to actually pull out why he said that. But what I did pull out of the Lincoln-Douglas debates is the meaning of the Civil War being expressed clearly. That the institution of slavery, controlled by white rich men, was infringing upon the plans of other rich northern white men to extend poor white men into the West so they could develop a middle class that can reduce the burden of taxes on the rich. That has nothing to do with black people, yet everything to do with slavery. And it is expressed overtly in this in this debate, the complicit desire for the country to be by white people and for white people. Now, by no stretch of the imagination, which is another misrepresentation of these men, these were complex men. They did not feel that slavery in and of itself was good, just not enough to do anything about it. That wasn't their calling, but if you ask them personally, do black people deserve to be slaves? Both of them, Stephen A. Douglas and Lincoln, said no. But was it either of their mission to address that? No, they just didn't care. Their goal was building the country with and for white people. But we have been taught throughout history that there's always a left and a right. There's a Republican and a Democrat. And this is probably the first big Republican and Democrat battle. And they were actually the same men. 90% of what they expressed on race and development of the country, they were aligned with. But they purposefully made themselves look different to control politics. And that's what's happening now. So, why is this important? Why would somebody want to know about this debate back then? I think it rings differently if a young person or an interested person, a fact-finding person, is looking at American history and saying, just like Lincoln and Douglas used these political ploys to dupe us into buying into a zero-sum thought process, we're seeing it again throughout history and present day. The Republicans today are telling you that the world is going to end if Democrats get in charge. And the Democrats are doing the same thing. And at the end of the day, they see the world pretty much the same. They're elevating their differences for power and control, but they're neighbors. They all went to the same schools. They got the same benefits package. They all belong to the same country club. Their kids go to the same daycares. They go to the same churches. And they pretty much have the same desires. So these historical events, in particular, I'm talking about the Lincoln-Douglas debates, is to show how common these tactics are in American history. And if you know American history, it's more difficult for you to be misled by current political propaganda.